Hi everyone, this is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to take a look at Venus's Cazimi with the Sun. This is a really rare and beautiful occurrence that happens a couple of times during Venus's synodic cycle with the Sun, when Venus comes into an exact conjunction with the Sun. And that moment is said to be greatly empowering for Venus. And so we're going to talk about what that means today and what you can look for, what you might be noticing, especially in the context of some of the other transits that are happening right now. But before I dive into that, I want to remind everybody that there are just 11 days left before my new class, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, begins. If you haven't checked it out yet, you could take a look on my website, nightlightastrology.com. Lots of cool stuff to check out there. The course is called Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. It's on the courses page. It's my first year class. The early bird discount is in effect. You can save $500. There's a payment plan. And we're also really not turning anybody away who's struggling due to coronavirus. This is making for a bigger class than normal, but because a lot of people are social distancing and at home and maybe looking for a way to lift their spirits and just tune in spiritually a little bit more, we decided to not cap the class this time around and are offering a sliding scale for people who are struggling financially due to the coronavirus. We have always had need-based tuition for a really long time, but we're just trying to open it up for more people who might really benefit from it right now. So anyway, you can check all of that out on my website. Be sure to check out my Bhakti channel as well. One of the questions that I'm covering in my Bhakti channel this week has to do with the multiplicity of karma, which is something that I wrote about recently and read a little excerpt from earlier this week, and have received some follow-up questions about the multiplicity of karma. So I'm going to be doing a video on that, which you might find interesting, and you may also find the Bhakti content interesting, given everything that's going on in the world right now and the clear need that we have for spiritual health. So all of that being said, let's go ahead and it starts on the 14th, the class. I knew I was missing something. Class starts on the 14th, so we're almost there. It's going to be a great class. I'm really looking forward to it. It's a great way to study astrology. If you have questions about it, feel free to email me, info@nightlightastrology.com. All right, so now what I'm going to do is pop the chart up on the screen and just give you a look at the real-time clock. So here is the Cazimi so that you can see it. You'll see right there, Venus is at the 13th degree of Gemini, right at the heart of the sun, within about 10 minutes. And ancient astrologers considered any planet at the exact heart of the sun, typically within the same degree of the sun, but also within, say, 15 minutes of an exact degree. Why that 15 number? The 15 degree and the 15-minute marker are significant because it's within an average of about 15 degrees of proximity to the sun that a planet disappears and you can no longer see it. And so, for example, when Venus draws to within about 15 degrees of the sun, either in direct motion or retrograde motion, when she's sort of in that range of 15 degrees, she's under the beams, she's disappeared. And invisible. And this can also indicate a wide variety of different things. It has a lot of different meanings depending on, has Venus just gone invisible while retrograde, or is Venus invisible while retrograde but coming out as the morning star? It's a really beautiful dance to look at the complexities of a synodic cycle. I'm not going to go through all of them today. We're just going to focus particularly on the Cazimi. But when a planet comes through its synodic cycle with the sun into the same degree as the sun and then down to within that 15 minutes of a degree, it's said to be at the heart of the sun. And there's a lot of images and metaphors that have been used to describe what this means. One of the most famous that you'll hear people say, astrologers say, traditional astrologers anyway, is that it's as though it is seated on the throne, or as though it's given the seal of the king or the queen, meaning the power to act with the authority of the sun, which is like the picture of the spirit that makes everything conscious and alive, makes everything grow. The sun was really at the center of the ancient paradigm, insofar as it was a symbol for that undying, eternal spark of consciousness that is within each of us, as well as that undying source or Godhead that we're all a part of. So the sun was really looked at as a kind of symbol that represented that. It wasn't thought of necessarily as that itself. It was actually called, you'll see all the planets referred to as the stars of the gods, meaning that they are emissaries or representatives of the gods that they were named after. So the sun is a symbol for all that represents light, truth, eternity, divinity, spirit, consciousness. And it has mundane manifestations too, like authority or fame or fathers or kings or anyone who has some degree of authority or leadership. It can also be represented in psychological astrology, or it can be representative of something like the ego. But it has centrality, which is why it has a variety of different mundane manifestations, because it is that which is central and that which is select. For example, the city was represented by the moon. The individual that stands out from the crowd is represented by the sun. In many ways, ancient astrology is a paradigm that is speaking to the need for individuation, from out of our entanglement with material nature, from out of the crowd, which is in some ways also, in some cases, a symbol for the unconscious, just going with the flow or going with the trends or what have you. And actually, we have to do this work of like finding ourselves, our individual nature. So that the sun represents all of these different layers of symbolism. It can be a CEO, it can be a symbol for the process of spiritual individuation. So there's a lot to the sun. When a planet comes within 15 degrees of the sun, the overpowering centrality of whatever the sun may represent, be it some authoritarian, negative, tyrannical force, or even our own, the dark side of our ego, or if it be the light or illuminating process of spiritualization, the sun is taking over. And planets that fall under the beams get burnt up by that, or get co-opted by that, or become invisibly consumed by whatever that represents. So that can be good or bad. There's a million different contexts of, millions and millions of different beings who will relate to that symbolism differently. And in this way, the laws of the universe themselves in ancient astrology are depicted as, through the planets, as myriad and multiple, which is to say that the Sun-Venus conjunction that's happening right now will signify as many different and unique things as there are people and unique situations, and yet it will remain with its internal symbolic consistency. So in that sense, you can think of transits and how we read them as something like a mandala or a tapestry. In the center is a jewel, and the jewel is the maybe core symbolic meaning. And every pattern surrounding the center of that jewel is a reiteration or some permutation or variation of the same pattern existing in relationship to the source, to what is at the center. And so this in Indian philosophy is sometimes referred to as God's Leela, God's play. And if we aren't turned with our consciousness toward the divinity at the center of all things, we miss it. We get entangled in our context or our situation. And because we're entangled in our situation and coming from a place of separative consciousness, not understanding ourselves as divine spiritual beings in relationship to that central jewel, the patterning is lost on us, and we experience avidya, or ignorance. We don't see the divinity that's right there in front of us, flowing through and connecting all things, making all relationships and all experiences holy. And so the goal of astrology, and this will come around to Venus retrograde in a second, so bear with me. The goal of astrology, why do we do this? Well, the goal is to learn to see the tapestry and the jewel at the center in all of these different transits, so that we are spiritualizing our consciousness. So when we study Venus at the heart of the sun, one of the things that we're doing is we're being able, I would say one of the core, let's say, archetypes and maybe the spiritual promise of such a transit is that whatever Venus represents is being spiritualized right now. And as Venus comes into the heart of the sun, there is also, excuse me, a sense in which, let's say, our relationships we're able to see what's at the heart of them. We're able to understand the hidden secret depths and truth of what exists at the center of our relationships. So this starts happening as soon as Venus comes under the beams of the sun. Venus will station, turn retrograde, and then start falling under the beams of the sun. And as that happens, it's as though if we are dialed in, if we have a contemplative spiritual practice that relates our heart back to our divine source, if we are in that mode of consciousness, then suddenly the sun illuminates, shines through Venus. And we start to see, at first sometimes very painfully, because the combustion process of Venus falling under the beams of the sun is like, the light pouring over the festering wound. At first, that when the wound is being healed or cleansed, the light of the sun doesn't feel good. It's like a monster who likes the dark, and they come out into the light of the sun, and they're like, I don't like the sun. It hurts. It's painful. But then it clarifies, and it penetrates through the layers of hurt and suffering, and it has the power to then illuminate. So this is the spiritual version of it, right? And it illuminates what Venus represents. So love, friendships, relationships. It clarifies for us, for example, especially in a Mercury ruled sign, with a square to Mars in a Jupiter ruled sign, which relationships we find to be supportive, and which voices and relationships and even points of view or beliefs we find to be conducive to love and peace and happiness in our lives. Who we associate and what we associate with shapes our reality. And so the Venus combustion can point out the painfulness of who and what we've been associating with that, frankly, we don't like or is not good for us. Also, sometimes it highlights for us the kind of association we need that we've been hiding from or afraid of, or that we don't want to let in because it would be too painful to hear a voice of dissent, or an outsider voice, or someone or something that's not pleasant for us to deal with, but maybe we need to. So when Venus falls under the beams of the sun, this painful process of evaluating our relationships, our values, and how they are shared, or where we should compromise or where we should not compromise, all of that comes under intense heat. It's like something starting to boil. And Mars in the mix, the square to Mars in Pisces, has amplified and intensified all of that. So I heard another astrologer say something to the effect of, it's like right now it's like you're so compelled to be social and to be evaluating and thinking and working things out socially, as we can see, for example, through the great demonstrations, protests, riots, all levels of social expression that people are being compelled to perform or enact. It's as though the force of fate is just squeezing and saying, get socialize, Venus in an air sign. But then there's a purifying effect, or there's a form of evaluation, discrimination, and analysis that's going on with the cutting executive energy of Mars. There's contest and aggression and hostility and back and forth, and that's Mars coming in there at the same time. And then Venus gets to the heart of the sun, and you have this moment of rebirth. Venus at the heart of the sun presses the reset button. Maybe not an entirely easy process thus far, but there is a kind of moment now that says, okay, now I know what matters. I feel clear. And that could be in a mundane romantic relationship. It could be with someone at work. It could be, like I've seen a number of people, my clients, who have spoken this past week about the need to change their relationship to what they take in from the media. Some people saying, I need to take in more. I don't pay enough attention. Some people saying, I take in way too much. And so even in those instances, that's the process of Venus combust with the sun in this social air sign being like, what do I need, and kind of evaluating one's social participation and one's social reality. Venus is the goddess of friendships and love, as well as general harmony. The evaluation process has not been without Mars. So this person that I heard said, it's like this astrologer that I heard said, was speaking, and I heard them say, it's like we're drawn into a table with a bunch of people that are very different from us to talk and hang out or maybe play a game. And we feel compelled to do so, but there's also like a pistol in the middle of the table. I'm not trying to it was just a really funny image. It struck me as really true. So I'm sorry. I don't mean to there's a lot of violence happening in the world right now. I don't mean to make light of it, but if you've been feeling that way in the confines of your own home, social distancing, or in relationships or at work or online or whatever, that's part of what's happening right now. It's what's signified in the stars. So Venus hits the Cazimi, gets to the heart of the sun within that 15-minute range, which is a reiteration of the 15 degrees within which this process begins. And when she's at the heart of the sun, the very deep level of purification, clarity, epiphany, Venus gets really empowered. The importance of harmony, beauty, love, grace, pleasantness. I saw the headline on a news channel this morning was most peaceful day of protests yet, or something like that. And that's kind of an appropriate headline. Whether it's true or not, I'm not getting into right now, but I'm just saying that kind of a headline, is sort of perfect for Venus being at the heart of the sun today. And whether that holds up or not with an eclipse and a square to Mars, I'm not sure about, right? We'll be talking more about that on Friday. But it is a day where there's I would say any of the following qualities would be potentially noticeable in the space around you, within yourself, maybe in the collective. Hopefully it would be beautiful to see. But reconciliation, agreements, for example, so when someone offers an olive branch of peace and says, let me extend something, let me offer or give you something to try to make this right or make this better. So extending something to somebody in a peace offering, Venus at the heart of the sun. Venus at the heart of the sun is understanding in love, understanding in relationships. It's also a time where Venus can be greatly empowered, and we can see through the difference between superficial Venusian things and real Venusian things. For example, yesterday, one of the images that was getting called out on social media, as I heard about or saw about anyway, were people capturing selfies, in the debris of these zones where riots and protests had taken place, and basically posturing themselves to look like, look at me, I'm doing some good in the world, or look at me, I'm yogic in the midst of the chaos, or whatever, these kind of photo ops. And I think maybe it was LeBron James who called it out or something like that. And and regardless of if it's true or not, or how widespread it is, it's just a good illustration of Venus combust turning into Venus Cazimi. Venus Cazimi at the heart of the sun is like saying, oh, one day you look into your wardrobe and you look and you go, oh my gosh, look at half of the clothes that I own. They're all related to something I'm trying to say or prove about myself. And I don't need to. It's like mind-blowing when we have those kinds of insights. I'm going to actually turn off my screen there so you can just see me. So it's mind-blowing to have such insights. I remember, this is kind of a random funny story, but one of the things that put me on the path of bhakti yoga long ago, that before I mean, I grew up in the Christian church, so bhakti and the spirit of devotion is pretty strong in the Christian church. I'd say Christianity, even according to the saints in the bhakti tradition that I follow, say that Christianity is a bhakti tradition. So it's Sufism. Anyway, growing up in the Christian church, I was a little sheltered, so I kind of did some experimenting and hit the ground pretty hard on a few occasions. One of the things that sort of started bringing me back to my spiritual roots and then to yoga, which became like this universalization of my Christian experience in some ways, was a mushroom trip, and then some other psychedelic experiences, and then a long 10 years worth of working with ayahuasca. Anyway, this mushroom experience that I had, I had a party at my house, like worst place to to do something like that, honestly. Anyway, I ended up locking myself in my room to get away from everybody, and I opened up my closet, and inside of my closet there was like all of my clothes, and that's exactly what happened. I was looking through all of my clothes, being like, wow, look at all that I'm trying to prove. Look at like what is going on in my head. my my wardrobe basically became the excuse me, like a mirror of my neurosis, you know what I mean? So it was just goofy, and I mean, but it was actually, like, it was profound because it really changed my life. Well, Venus at the heart of the sun can be just like that, where it's like, okay, look at the difference between the image of something and the assumptions that we make, and that, judging a book by its cover, basically, or presenting images to the world that don't really maybe match up with what we really think or feel. And sometimes we're not aware of that, and it's not, we don't have to. Uh, it depends. Depending, most of us need healthy reminders of what we feel, what we believe, what we think, in comparison to the images that we attach ourselves to, or that we try to project or present to the world. I've been very conscious of that lately, in myself, and in talking to some of my close friends. That's something that I think a lot of people, and my clients, I think a lot of people are experiencing that right now. It's as though, you know, the do you remember the Sprite ads, like way back in the day? Image is nothing, obey your thirst. Do you remember that? I think that was how it went. It was like, image is nothing, thirst is everything, obey your thirst. What a weird ad. Have you ever like just really thought about that ad? First of all, it plays on the need for authenticity. It's like, oh yeah, be authentic. Don't pay attention to images in the world. Just go for what's real. Drink this product filled with corn syrup, right? Like, so I find, though, that like my own mind is seduced like a Sprite ad a lot. And I don't know about you guys, I can only speak for myself, but like I have to be really careful that I'm not being seduced like that Sprite ad with my own sense of what's authentic. Just shifting the narrative. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, there's something inauthentic over here. So let me find the image, the appearance of something that's authentic, and pump that. But as we're still in that sense, just like the Sprite commercial, we're still buying into something that is ultimately superficial. So where does that, I guess, where does the authentic beauty, where does the real, in ancient Greek mythology that informed astrology, the planets rejoiced in certain houses, they rejoiced in certain places of the sky, because the Greeks believed that all planets and all things naturally tried to move toward the ideal image in the soul that brought happiness. And happiness was also truth, and truth was also beauty, and beauty was also goodness. And all things are trying to move toward that. It's so hard when we're trying to move toward that, and yet we're also trying to do that, not just personally, not just individually, but in relationship. And it's so easy to try to hide, just bypass that part of it, right? Like, okay, well, it's a solo quest. It's too hard to evaluate what's real, beautiful, just, true, good in relationships socially, because everyone's got a different opinion and a different need, and it's like coordinating a room full of 1,000 kittens or something. It's like crazy. Like, who wants to do it? So I guess I'll just head to a cave. You know what I mean? And I know that I do that sometimes. I mean, just in little ways. Uh, anyway, but the truth of the matter is that we can't really find what's real and true and authentic to us without the context of relationships, without the mirror of relationships. This is why in Krishna Bhakti, the paradigm of spiritual enlightenment is not the solo Olympic quest for enlightenment, just like deadlifting our existence solo to just absorb into the monad and then disappear. It's not the picture in Bhakti, which is what drew me in, is that it's a social process. The soul is a social being, and its need for truth, beauty, happiness, goodness, justice, all of those things are inherent in what the soul needs and cannot be realized through anything but relationship. Starting with the relationship between the soul and God, that's where it starts. That's why Jesus said that the number one commandment was to love God with all of everything you've got. And then the second commandment, which was like it, was to love others. So there is a sense in which if you're not an individuating spiritual being, all of these social constructs that we're working through in the world are not going to be available to you as an aid and ally in spiritual enlightenment. Take that or leave it, but that's the idea. However, it's not purely individual either. Our individual spiritual quest is shaped and perfected and harmonized through others, which is why in Krishna Bhakti we say that it's Krishna and Radha, that there's a tango between the sort of yin and yang of God. And so at any rate, all of this, I know I'm waxing philosophical today, but all of this is to say that the enlightenment available to us right now, and it could be very mundane. It could be about your relationship with one of your kids, it could be a relationship with a friend, or the way that you tune into social media or not, or your job, or the way you see yourself and your style and your appearance in the world. But Venus at the heart of the sun is holding up a beautiful mirror to us and saying like look in it, and what are you seeing? Is it real? Is it not real? And the light and clarity that we receive right now can help us to make really important adjustments in the social dimension of our enlightenment process. So I guess that's about the message that I have. This is pretty impromptu today. I don't have my usual notes. I'm still with family, coming back this weekend, so I'll be back and have a little bit more structure. I know some people have said that they like these talks that are a little bit more on the fly, but I'll have a little bit more structure again for you all next week. Please tell me your stories about Venus Cazimi, Venus at the heart of the sun. What kinds of realizations or changes are you having within yourself that speak in some way to the divine relationships that you share in the world with others, and anything else, any other interesting realizations you've been having? I'd love to hear from you. We'll be coming back on Friday for a talk on the eclipse. There's some other stuff I'm putting out this week, just kind of random bonus stuff. I hope you guys enjoy. Remember, just like 11 days left until my new class starts, so be sure to check that out, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. I'd love to hear what you guys have been going through, and again, what your realizations have been. So have a great week, everybody, and I hope to see you again soon. All right.